Been buying gold for persistently and increasingly since around about 2013. Most notably, it's the developing central banks who have been buying the gold, on largely playing catch-up against many of the larger Western central banks. And they're buying it for a number of reasons. Firstly, they're buying it for pure diversification amongst their own portfolio, which I think has been the major driver in the early stages. Most recently, they've been buying gold to hedge against inflation, which I think they're playing a little bit of catch-up. And lastly, of course, there is the geopolitical risk, which is no one's immune to. There's also been quite a bit of internal portfolio shift inside central banks, shifting from various currency holdings into gold for that reason as well. It's not always been brand new gold they've bought.
As you mentioned, the diversification is still in the early stage, but we have seen de-dollarization trend gaining momentum recently. In your opinion, does it relate to the rising demand for gold? And what role do you think gold will play in the future in this process?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about de-dollarization, and a lot of it is almost invisible. I do think there has been some move by some central banks to move themselves out of not just dollars, but other currencies as well. And I think that's irrefutable. But at the same time, it's very difficult for me to put a number to it or record it in any particular way. However, at the same time, I think it's worth noting we're seeing almost more central bankers buying gold as a consequence of either not having enough in their portfolio or, as I mentioned earlier, wanting to diversify either against their perhaps one-sided portfolio or hedge against inflation, which doesn't seem to be going away.
And we have seen gold prices gain significant ground recently. In your opinion, will this trend continue, and how will inflation and central bank decisions influence the prices of the precious metal?
Well, I think obviously the effect of interest rates is obvious. I think inflation, the effect of that is obvious as well. If my personal feeling is that inflation is a bit sticky, and I do feel that the central banks, call it the Fed, is going to be forced to tighten just that little bit more, and maybe more than people expected. That, I believe, will nudge the economies into a necessary but shallow short recession, because that has historically been the only way you stop inflation. If that is the case, then I continue to see a very, very healthy outlook for gold. That's just the inflation element. But then, of course, you've got an array of different things. You've got the geopolitical impacts as well, which I think are really burgeoning and we're seeing in front of our eyes. But to me, the most important thing is the amount of debt there is in the world. We've seen two banks collapse relatively quickly, not necessarily due to debt, but the nervousness in the markets is tangible. And I think that is going to be a significant gold driver in the not too distant future.